Welcome to My Life. We're very pleased to have Bob McFarland from Milford, Michigan with us. He's been a resident of Milford in Oakland County since 1959 and has had some very interesting things happen during his life. For one thing, he made the Athletic Hall of Fame at Milford High School.
Yes, I did.
He went to Western Michigan University for a while. He is a veteran of the Vietnam War. And he's also a veteran of General Motors.
Yes.
Retired from GM as a master electrician. He also started his own electric business before he retired from General Motors, and then took a brief pause to take a little excursion to Afghanistan, which is another thing we're going to talk about. So again, very pleased to have Bob McFarland with us.
Well, thank you.
What I always like to start out with is what the heck you're doing now.
Keeping busy.
You're unofficially retired, right?
Yes. Semi-retired, working 6 days a week doing electrical work and audiovisual. But I work with my son, my grandson, my daughter-in-law. Pretty much a family business, and I enjoy what I do. I enjoy working with my family, and I really enjoy doing what I do.
And you do, it's primarily residential work that you do?
Well, we do both commercial and residential. Primarily residential, but we do some commercial work also.
And that's a business that you started
Right.
originally when you were still working for General Motors.
Yes, it was a part-time job. Most of us were master electricians at the GM Proving Grounds, so we all got our contractor's license and proceeded to have our own little companies on the side.
And then you decided to go on this other adventure, which we'll talk about later, so that kind of put a pause to the business. But then when you came back to town, you kind of reinstated, or had your son ran it while you were gone?
Yeah, he was running the show when I was gone. I mean, it was still McFarland Electric, still in my name, the license and everything, but I just took a little leave of absence and went to Afghanistan. So.
Well, being an electrician wasn't always what you were interested in, was it?
No, I didn't think, if someone would have told me I was going to be an electrician, I would have said no way. I didn't like the idea of getting shocked or something like that, but I had the opportunity at General Motors to join the apprenticeship there, and instead of getting laid off, I thought, why not? So after 4 years, I became a journeyman electrician. And then I went on and got my master's license, and we were there. I was at General Motors Proving Grounds for about 28 years.
Yeah. Before we get into that anymore, I want to back up a little bit farther. You were originally born in Detroit, is that true?
Yes. I was born in 1950 in Detroit. My brothers started hanging around with the wrong crowd, and my folks decided it's time to move out. So
whereabouts in Detroit did you move?
Grand River and Livernois.
So kind of over on the northwest side there.
Yes. I think the high school we would have gone to would have been McKenzie or St. Cecilia.
Mm-hmm. What did your father do for a living?
He was a teacher for the Detroit Board of Education.
Really?
For 30-some years.
Did he teach high school? Or?
He taught at Detroit Northern High School.
Wow.
Yes.
Did your mother do that as well?
No, she didn't. She was more she worked at a jewelry department as a manager of a jewelry department downtown Pontiac.
Is that right?
WKC, I don't know.
One of the old stores.
Yes. Both my parents worked just to make ends meet and for us boys at the time.
Now, were your grandparents living in the area?
My grandfather lived in Detroit. My grandmother on my mother's side had passed away, and my grandmother on my father's side lived downtown at the Teller Hotel. And my grandfather, again on my father's side, had passed away. He was a professor down at Wayne State. He was under Soapy Williams, the governor of Michigan, made liquor control chairman of the state of Michigan at one time.
Really?
So
your family had some educated people.
They did. In fact, he helped start the MEMIC, which is Michigan Educational Insurance.
That's right.
So he was part of the
insurance company for teachers.
Yes. So
Did you know your grandparents pretty well?
No, my grandfather died on my dad's side right before I was born in 1950. He was down at Tiger Stadium. At that time, I'm sure it was Briggs Stadium, and had a heart attack. And then on my mother's side, my grandfather lived a ways after I was still around, and he eventually passed away too.
You didn't get down to the Teller Hotel very often, huh?
I had been there twice. Yeah. Quick story there. My father and I went out with my grandmother to dinner or lunch. It was lunch, and she says, "Aren't you going to eat, Bobby?" And I says, "I'm already done, Grandma." She says, "Well," and she's one of these picky eaters that cut her meat and move it around the plate, and I couldn't. Yeah, so I was already done eating, and she didn't know I had eaten. That's how slow the eater she was, and she was pretty talkative, but that's okay.
Did you ever try and trace your family history back?
No, my father had said at one time McFarland, my name was spelled MacFarlane, and then it was changed to Mick, McFarland. I don't know if it's the Scotch and the Irish in the clans back then had some issues, but it was changed. Yeah.
Did you ever know any great-grandparents?
No, I did not.
Were they living in this country at some point?
My great-grandparents on my father's side, yes. On my mother's side, no, they came from Germany.
Ah,
so.
Okay. Tell me a little bit about what you remember about living in Northwest Detroit. Were you in a neighborhood over there?
Yeah, I had some friends. I remember growing up, I learned how to ride a bike. My brother put me on a two-wheeler and shoved me down the sidewalk, and I ran into an elderly lady walking down the sidewalk. And she was okay, thank God, but everyone's laughing but me. And but I went to up until third grade. The school I went to was called Ruth Ruff, and I remember that. And then I started fourth grade in Milford. So.
Okay, was that a tough move for you? I mean, you were what, 9 years old?
9 years old. It wasn't that bad. I mean, I got to meet friends and right away in Milford, and we really enjoyed it out there. I mean, go swimming and the country life at that time. So.
What made your folks choose Milford?
It was close to Kensington. We used to go to Kensington when we lived in Detroit. And so my dad still made that drive all the way down to Claremont and Woodward, or Chicago, and Chicago and Woodward, to Detroit Northern from Milford every day.
Yeah, that was a ways to go.
Yeah, yes, it was. So.
Especially back then, because the freeways weren't then what they are now.
No. So, and they did it for us boys to have a good life, raised up in a nice area. And
how did your brother do? Did things work out for him after the move?
Oh, excellent. Yeah, he did real well. He married, and he got into sales. Financially, did excellent. Has 3 kids also, and he's a grandfather 7 times. Lives in the Chicago area, but he did real well. And my other brother that I had mentioned earlier, that he was a Marine, had pretty much lived in Milford also, worked at the GM Proving Grounds and retired from there too.
Okay. I want to talk more about education in your family. Take a break right now, but we'll be right back.
There's a lot of history to Oxford. Hidden around every corner, deep in every crack, and sometimes right in front of you, waiting to be discovered. If you just dig a little, you'll find the great history of our beautiful town. Welcome to Historic Oxford.
Back with Bob McFarland from Milford. Talking about your life right after you moved from Detroit out to Milford in 1959, your dad was a teacher, had been a teacher all his life. Education must have been emphasized in your family, I would guess. Were they pretty strong about you getting good grades and everything?
Yes, they were. I mean, they preached it, and we set aside time to study. I was pretty good. They knew that my grades came in pretty good. My one brother they had to keep an eye on him, but I think overall we did well. Our parents brought us up correctly and properly, and as parents thought that education was a must too. So
What school in Milford did you start at when you moved up there?
in fourth grade I went to Highland Elementary, and in fact that's my wife now is where I met her first in fourth grade at Highland Elementary, and then from there I went back to Milford for 1 year. Because of the population boom in Milford, they were moving kids around. And in sixth grade, or both fifth grade and sixth grade, I had half-day sessions because of the population growth. And then junior high, at that time it was called, I went to Milford Junior High, 7th, 8th, and 9th grade, and then Milford High School, 10th, 11th, and 12th.
Sounds like Milford was a pleasant move for you.
Oh, it was great.
Yeah.
Yeah, the whole family, I mean, everybody loved it out there, and nice area, and good neighbors, and good upbringing.
Now, did your mom leave the jewelry store when you moved?
No, I mean, no. In
She's still
Detroit,
driving
she
to
worked
Putney?
at Mitchell Greeting Card Company, which was on Grand River near Livernois. And then when we moved out to Milford, she didn't do a whole lot at first, and then because we were all in school, she wanted to keep busy, and she decided to start working at that jewelry department in Pontiac at WKC.
Oh, I see. What's one of your favorite memories about stuff that you did in Milford during those early years?
Going swimming a lot during the summer. We had a hill behind the house that we used to take cardboard and slide down. Brought back good memories. Hanging around with the kids in Milford on our bikes. But
Was your mom a pretty good cook?
she was an excellent cook.
What was your favorite meal?
Probably meatloaf. Yeah, meatloaf.
Good old standard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mashed potatoes and meatloaf.
Tell me, did they have a separate middle school before high school that you
Yes,
went
it
to?
was a Milford Junior High, it was called, and that was 7th, 8th, and 9th grade. Freshmen went there because of the, again, population growth. And then the high school was 10th, 11th, and 12th.
At what point did you start getting interested in sports?
I was 7 years old, I believe, when I first could play Little League Baseball. And was pretty good. I think I made the All-Star team my very first year, and did pretty good in Little League Baseball. But I think what more than anything that made me interested in sports was my older brothers. And they'd be playing street football or baseball or something like that, and my dad would always tell them, take Bobby with you. And because of that, I think it helped me become a pretty good athlete, because I was playing with the older boys and older guys, and I learned quick. And that's when I knew that I really enjoyed sports. I watched it on TV a lot and stuff like that. But so Little League Baseball, and then when I was able to play football in Milford Junior High, I played football, basketball, and baseball there. So.
Did you have any other interests when you were in the middle school years, or hobbies?
No, it was pretty much sports in school.
But you were very involved with that, weren't
Yes.
you? Yeah.
All 3 seasons usually. In summertime it would be Little League baseball.
Did you, as a family, did you take many vacations back then out of the
No,
area?
once in a
or-
while we would go up to Houghton Lake,
Mhm.
and but other than that, we didn't do a whole lot of vacations.
Well, the good thing about Milford is you got a lot of lakes around
Right.
you, so you didn't have to go far to have a good time in the summer.
Yeah, we didn't have a whole lot of money,
Yeah.
but just enough to get by and make ends meet.
Did you have many other relatives around you, many cousins or uncles or?
Not at that time. No, my sisters, one lived in Ann Arbor, and one sister, these are older sisters, lived out in Las Vegas.
Okay, so there was nobody really close
No,
by to bond
no.
with. When you were going into high school, you were probably pretty comfortable being relatively successful in sports and probably going into that school with a lot of the same friends that you'd made during the earlier years, huh?
Yes, yep. And friends in Milford, there was 2 junior high schools. I know they call them middle schools now, but you had Highland Junior High and Milford Junior High. And I had friends at Highland Junior High and, of course, Milford, but Highland Junior High was our arch rival, of course, in junior high school.
Yeah.
And we, quick story there, I scored 6 touchdowns in 1/2 against them in football, and
Oh boy.
my coach wouldn't put me back out in the second half. But that was our arch rival. I enjoyed that. But
Did he think your luck had run out or what?
no, he didn't want me to score anymore. He said I had enough.
You know, we were getting into the Vietnam era back then.
Oh,
And that had to be something that was going through your mind. I mean, you're going through high school, and especially during the last year or two, you're thinking about your future and what you're going to do. What kind of thoughts are running through your
Well,
head?
you're right, because in high school, my brother was over in Vietnam as a Marine. And now, at that time, of course, you didn't have the knowledge like you have today with what's going on. And every night with the news coming on, my mother would hear so many fatalities, and not knowing, because you didn't have the communication back then like you have now. And
There wasn't any FaceTime.
no, and she would leave the room crying every night.
Yeah, because all you really had to, I mean, yeah, okay, there might be an occasional telephone call if he was
Yeah.
lucky enough to be close
Right.
to, you know.
He, unfortunately, his friend stepped on a landmine in Vietnam, and he lost his friend, but my brother got shrapnel all through his chest and stomach, and sent to Germany at that time, and he was in a hospital for 2 months, and we were thinking and hoping he was coming home, but the Marines sent him back to Vietnam.
Wow.
So he got a Purple Heart on that, and he saw a lot. He mentally, he went through a living.
Yeah. How's he doing now?
Good. I don't know if you remember the movie Platoon.
I do.
It came out like in the early 80s, but my brother never talked about Vietnam. And when that came out, it opened him up a little bit, and I was the first one he talked to me about things he had to do that were ungodly. I mean, yeah, he went through a living hell. And
What kind of guidance were your folks? We have to take a break right now. I'm getting the signal here that we need to pause.
am I
wanna talk to
rattling
you.
on too much?
No, not at all. Not
Okay.
at all. This is interesting. I want to talk more about Vietnam and its effect on your family. We'll be back in just a minute.
All night long.
Back with Bob McFarland. We were just talking about the Vietnam era, when you were in high school, how your brother was actually in service over there and was injured, and how he finally made it back, and so forth. Your father was an educator. Your folks were educated people. What kind of vibes did you get from them about Vietnam during that time?
Well, they knew, as citizens, we had to do our part, and they had no problems with, my brother volunteered for the Marines. In my case, I was drafted, but they knew we were doing our part as U.S. citizens, and they didn't want to see us get hurt and like that, but they knew part of war, it can happen.
Sure.
And we were brought up in a loving family and tight, and so war can be pretty rough.
Thank goodness
Yes.
you all survived it.
Yeah.
During your senior, I'm sorry.
What I was going to say too, I'm glad I didn't have to go to Vietnam, so I didn't want to put my mother through another living hell like she went through.
During your senior year, while all this was going on, I mean, you had to start thinking about what you're going to do with the rest of your life. What was going through your mind about what your next step was going to be?
Well, believe it or not, I was hoping I was going to get a scholarship to play football somewhere. And I did get offers at smaller schools because at 5'8" and 145 pounds, you weren't too many schools, big schools are going to be interested in you. But I was honorable mention All-State and did pretty well. But some of the smaller schools showed interest, but they didn't offer academic. They didn't offer sports scholarships, mostly academic. I mean, I had like a 3.2 average, but even some of those smaller MI-AA schools like Olivet and Adrian, pretty expensive at that time, and we couldn't afford it. So that's when I decided to go to Western.
And what were you thinking? Did you pretty much know what you would like to be then, or were you just...
No, not really. I mean, I thought I wanted to get in business of some sort, and that's what I started to take my business core classes. But at the same time, I was still interested in sports, so I thought someday I'd like to get into coaching if possible. And then that's when, after the lottery come out for the being drafted, and my number was 64.
That was pretty low on the list.
It was. You were in, put it that way.
Right.
But so.
Just out of curiosity, was your lottery center Detroit or Milford?
Detroit.
Okay, yeah, back to where you were born. All right. Okay, so were you kind of scrambling then for your options, or?
Oh, I was. I knew I was going in, and that's when my brother kept telling me, "You don't want to be a Marine here." And that's unusual for Marines, because Marines are tight-blooded, they're core people. I mean, once a Marine, always a Marine. And for him to say that, but that's because he knew what they were going through over there. But I was told, I checked into it about enlisting into the, if there was a chance to do it for, if I enlisted, and it was called RA at the time, for 2 years, active duty, and then that would entail me to be into the Army without any other chances of being picked out to go in some other forces.
Right, so that was like 2 years of active duty.
2 years active and 2 years inactive and 2 years reserve. And I did have to go in the reserves after that too. But
where'd you have to go for your meetings?
Just 2 weeks. I didn't have to go to any meetings, but on about the 5th year, I got a call saying you got to go 2 weeks of training. And this is...
Surprise, surprise.
Yeah, I had to go to Wisconsin, land of the lakes, I think, or is it Minnesota, that land of the lakes?
To a base over there?
Yeah, for 2 weeks. That was strange.
Backing up, when you did go into the active duty, where were you sent to first?
I was at Fort Knox for basic training. I went to Fort Polk for advanced infantry training. And pretty much our whole battalion was headed toward Vietnam. And fortunately, I met a guy over at Fort Polk that worked in personnel. His name was Bob Spry. And I said, what are you doing here? He says, I work in personnel. I said, you work in personnel? And I said, if there is any way, shape or form, if you can somehow change my order from Vietnam, I'd really like it. But so right before pretty much the whole battalion was headed toward Vietnam, there was like 5 or 6 people, their orders were changed, and they were either going to go to Alaska, Hawaii, or Panama. And I was one of the 6, and I went to Panama. So
To Panama.
yeah.
I'll bet that brought forth a sigh of relief.
It did.
Not just with you, but with your folks.
And that was more important to me for my folks.
Yeah.
If I would have had to go to Vietnam, I would have gone in a heartbeat. But for my folks, I was really pleased.
What kind of a job did they put you in down there?
At first, I was in the infantry area, and then we did jungle training for guys going over to Vietnam, which was really interesting. And then I became a battalion crypto clerk, which I had the highest security clearance you could have in the Army at that time. And then I was on the battalion basketball team, which exempt me from duty for during that season. And when this E8 sergeant couldn't make practice to coach, I coached the team, and we had a pretty good team.
I don't know which is considered better duty in the military, being in the band or being on one of the sports teams.
Yeah, all you had to do was play basketball and go to practice so I was very fortunate, very fortunate.
How did you find yourself received by the people in Panama during that time?
Pretty much, since we were in the Canal Zone is at that time, a lot of Americans and stuff like that. But if you got out of the Canal Zone into the cities like Cologne and Panama City, you were frowned upon at that time.
Really?
Yeah.
What was their beef?
Well, you were pretty much interfering with their country.
Yeah.
And, yeah, that's,
Was that a surprise to you, or?
No. I know, you wouldn't want people coming into your country and dividing it up, but actually what U.S. did was, and maybe they were blindsided, in a point where they didn't realize at the time it was really going to be beneficial to the country of Panama.
I want to talk more about your military experience in Panama, and I want to get on to your career with General Motors and establishing your electric company and your experience overseas with that field too. But we're running out of time, unfortunately, right now, so we're going to have a second episode with Bob McFarland, and I hope that you'll be able to join us.
Canine Stray Rescue is Oxford's own local dog rescue. Each year they take in hundreds of dogs and bring them into suitable homes. A certified nonprofit organization, Canine Dog Rescue strives to give pound dogs a new leash on life. To donate, adopt, or even volunteer, call them at 248-628-0435 or go to their website, dogsaver.org, and click on the Canine Stray Rescue League